It really feels like yesterday that I went down to Ontario, California to play my first tournament with NorCal. I had heard a lot about NorCal my freshman year of high school, spent the entire fall at the gym, at the track. I was undersized, I was 5'9", Rob says I was 5'8", but I was 5'9". About 150 pounds, could bench press 155 pounds. I thought I was pretty strong for being 15. And then I show up and everybody's like 5 inches taller than me with like 25 pounds more muscle. And the only thing that I think at the time is, man, I just want to be a part of this group. I'll do whatever I need to do to be a part of this group. These guys are better athletes than I'd ever seen. And if I can just be a part of this group, I think good things will come from it. When I was in high school, when I was your age, I never thought of anything beyond baseball. I just wanted to be the best baseball player I could be. I wanted to make it to the major leagues like all of you guys do. But like Rob says, the journey ends up being probably the most valuable experience that you get from it. You know, when people ask me, man, do you miss college? Do you miss pro ball? I miss the experience, I miss the teammates, I miss the camaraderie. I don't miss the travel, I don't miss the stress. Baseball's a hard game, you guys know. But the one thing that I got from it that so few people have in their adult life is the ability to learn how to win, to learn how to compete. And when you guys are playing in these elite tournaments, you guys are playing against guys throwing probably low 90s, some of them at this point at your age.
They're only freshmen.
Well, there's probably a couple guys. Yeah.
I know, but
Right.
they look old.
Right. Well, that's how you recruit.
Yeah.
You'll learn as you start getting more scouts to your games, as you start getting brighter spotlights on you, that no matter what happens, you just got to learn how to compete. And you don't necessarily know at the age of 14, 15, 16 years old what that means, what you actually get from learning how to compete. But let me tell you, when you go in front of 400 scouts, if you're playing at area codes, that still goes on, and you make a mistake, you know that everybody sees you. You know that all your buddies are seeing you make that mistake. You know every coach who's recruiting you's seeing you make that mistake. And eventually, you need to learn the mindset that's required to get over that mistake and have a good game and finish it out. Because the game of baseball has a lot of failure, as you know, and people talk about hitting, you know, you're successful if you get 3 hits out of 10. But really, as a shortstop, as an infielder, you know that things can spiral out of control if you can't maintain your composure, because you are going to make mistakes. And when I think about the experience that I had through baseball, playing in adverse environments, going down to LSU, going down to the University of Arkansas, playing in front of 10,000 screaming people, and making mistakes in front of them, and figuring out what mindset do I need to take to overcome these mistakes. You know, you watch elite players on TV and you think, oh, they're poised, they're collected. But as you start playing at a higher and higher level, you realize that a lot of these elite players are not as poised and collected as they come off on the outside, but that's something that they learn through the process. So when I was in my first couple series as an SEC player, you know, I had the yips throwing the ball across the infield in and out, right, in between innings. So what do you think that's going to be like when I'm in front of 7,000 hostile fans at Arkansas and I'm sailing the first baseman by 5-10 feet, you know, but I still need to make those plays when the pressure's on and the lights are on me. And guess what? Figured out a way to get it done. And when you figure out a way to get it done over and over again, you learn the mental tricks that you need to tell yourself to compete at the highest level you possibly can. Most adults have no idea how to do that. And I can tell you this from working at Google. You know, working in a corporate environment can be quite manipulative. They're not going to be as straightforward with you as Rob will be. You know, if you're doing well, they're trying to extend your duration before they can promote you. They're going to give you a lot of BS. And a lot of my colleagues who I worked with who didn't have the elite sports experience, it just drained them mentally. They couldn't bring their best selves to work, and ultimately they couldn't get the most out of that experience. Well, some of you guys are going to play professionally, some of you guys are going to play in the major leagues, but most of you guys are going to find yourself when you're my age having to work for a living. And let me tell you, the experience that I had as an elite athlete is incomparable for what it's prepared me as an entrepreneur. So Rob alluded on this earlier. I make money eating steak and lifting weights, basically right now. I figured out how to cook really good food, eat 4,000 calories a day, and get shredded without like tracking all the stuff that people say you have to do. And I thought 5 years ago, if there's one way I can influence the world, it's not through what I'm doing at Google, it's actually sharing how I approach training and how I approach diet. And so that's what I started doing. Built that business up while I had my last job, built that up to a pretty livable income while I was working my last job. So I started doing it full time last May, and it's gone quite well. It's gone much better than I could have wished it to go 15 months ago. But every 3 days I'm having a bad day, because I sell products every single day, just like you have at bats every single day. And some days you're going to go 0 for 4. I go 0 for 4. I go 1 for 10 selling products sometimes. And most people, after they have that experience of failure, they get dejected. They can't have a good approach the next day. And then they have 2 bad days in a row, and then they can't have a good approach the 3rd day. And so irrespective of what value they can possibly bring to the market, irrespective of how much money their goods and services can possibly bring them, they don't have the mindset to overcome the roller coaster that is life. And so if there's one thing that you can get from this experience playing elite baseball at your level, it's knowing how to manage your own emotions so you can bring your best self every play of every game. And you're gonna have limitless challenges in baseball. Like Rob mentioned, your flight got delayed. Well, my first road trip as a professional baseball player, our bus broke down. We pulled over to the side of the road, back axle's bright orange. Everybody's saying, hey, I think we should stop. Our bus driver's like, no, we're trucking it. Going back from Idaho Falls to Casper, Wyoming. Well, we drive about 2 minutes, we hear a thud. Back wheels fall off, they burn off. So we're parked up on the side of the road at some dude ranch. Nobody's really sleeping, we're parked diagonally. We have a game the next day. They're not moving the game. And we all roll up to the field on 3 hours of sleep, basically straight from getting back on what turned out to be a 10-hour trip, and we had to play. That's gonna happen to you several times in your career, and as much as it pisses you off, as much as it makes you uncomfortable, it's just one speed bump, and life's gonna give you a lot of speed bumps. So cherish the opportunity that you guys have to compete. The more you learn how to win, the more capable, more opportunities you're gonna have at the end of your career. Like Rob mentioned, my first job after I got done playing minor league baseball, where I was making $1,100 a month like everybody else, I got to work at a global macro hedge fund based in Hong Kong. Had the super rich Vandy alum fly me around on a private jet when I was 23. It was great. And I took that experience and I parlayed that into a Google job where they paid me 6 figures to not do very much, which was also great. Took that experience to get a job at a cryptocurrency exchange, continue to get paid more, continue to build out my side businesses. And I would not be able to do any of this without my baseball experience, and frankly, without what Rob did for me. He won't admit it, but the exposure that I got when I was in your shoes, invaluable. So cherish every moment that you have here. This is gonna be the most fun you're gonna have. These next 4 years are gonna be the most fun you're gonna have playing baseball, because you're gonna have brighter lights on you when you get to college, but that also comes with a lot more pressure. And so when you talk to all my NorCal teammates, when they got to the Division I level or professional level, we all talked about how much fun we had at these travel tournaments like this. So enjoy it.
So a couple of questions for you. What were some of your sports hacks to get better and learn how to play under pressure and shake it off?
So honestly, as an infielder, I took a very different approach to envisioning what was going to happen compared to what sports psychologists say. So sports psychologists say your mind can't recognize the difference between envisioning success and envisioning failure. Anytime a ball was drilled at me, whether I was playing second base or third base in college, and I played much shortstop in college, I actually imagined myself missing the ball. And what that did is it made my hands loose enough to where they reacted and I always caught it, right? So one of the things that I always want to do, whether it's in baseball or it's in life, is I always want to have multiple opportunities to succeed. And one of the things that I did when I was in high school is I made sure that I got my 60 time down as low as I possibly could. I made sure I got my bat speed up as high as I possibly could, because I knew that it wasn't guaranteed that I was going to go play really well at a tournament. But I could make sure that I was throwing 88 miles an hour across the infield from shortstop. I could make sure that I was running a 4-2 down the line, 4-3 down the line, and I could make sure that I looked athletic even if I swung and missed. And so having optionality with everything you do reduces stress. Understanding that you can overcome the worst that could possibly happen helps you overcome stress.
One of the things it sounds like to me is because you were prepared, you felt like you've earned it, so you're not going to stress as much. It's second habit. It's something you've practiced all the time.
A little bit. That's a double-edged sword too, because one of the things, practice prepares you to play, but for people who have mental blocks, it's hard to practice your way out of a mental block, right? And I played with a lot of people who are really good at practicing. They're really good at working hard, but they use that hard work to try to overcome mental blocks on the field, and it doesn't really work like that. Hard work is something that you need to do. If you want to be fast, you got to run, you got to jump. Like, it's not like rocket science. At the same time, when you're on the field, the best players, the best competitors are a little bit crazy out there, right? The best students that I played with weren't the best players, and it wasn't because the players were too stupid. It was because their minds worked differently. The best players are irrationally confident. The best players can go into a casino and think that they're going to hit red 4 times in a row when it's obviously math. Like, no, you have a 1 in 16 chance of that happening. Irrational confidence wins in life, right? Whether you're working a sales job, whether you're interviewing for any job, whether you're playing in front of college coaches, they evaluate your body language. You don't want to be timid. You want to be aggressive, and you want to be confident, because that's what they take away, right? They're not writing down, Alex got 2 hits and 4 at bats. They're writing down, he's got average, like major league average arm, running a 4-2 down the line. He has confidence and he has composure. That's what they're writing. They don't care about your stats for the most part, but they do care how you carry yourself. And that's one thing that you can always have under your control. No matter what's going on, you can always carry yourself like your shit doesn't stink. And as long as you do the preparation before the game, that's kind of the best attitude to have on the field.
We're going to go around. I'm going to pick on some guys to ask questions. Just want somebody have any. I'm going right to you. No. Any question you wish.
Just about baseball? Or
Yes.
just like
Anything.
Baseball or life, doesn't matter.
How was your freshman year playing freshman?
It was very hard. It was the hardest single year of my life. And, a lot of things. Like, I was a good high school student, scored well on my SAT, and I went to a good high school, so it prepared me for college. But, my first semester, the second test I took at Vandy was 25% of my political science grade. I got a 48 on it. And I'm like, wait, what? I studied for this the same way I studied for my high school classes, and I'm basically guaranteed to not be able to get more than a C in this class. And so combining that with high intensity baseball, where you can make mistakes at the high school level, but if you're making fielding errors, throwing errors in front of Corbin, he's gonna get on you because he wants to see if you can handle the pressure of an SEC environment, right? And so, like if I make a mistake, maybe Rob's gonna get on me, but he's not gonna get on me the way Corbin's gonna get on me, because Corbin's trying to test. He's trying to light a fire under your ass to see, can I trust this guy in the 9th inning when we're going down to Knoxville? We're going down to Oxford, Mississippi. And so just having to deal with that amount of pressure, combined with the fact that, you don't sleep as well when you're stressed out, right? So a lot of times my freshman year, I'm sleeping 4, 5, 6 hours, and I got to go do a full workout, right? Plus class. And these workouts are harder than the workouts that I did in high school. And my first day on campus, when they took our body fat, did our measurements and everything, I repped 185 19 times on bench press. I came in at 8.6% body fat at 186 pounds. So I was in good shape coming into college. What I was doing in high school was way easier than what we ended up doing at Vanderbilt. So just having to come prepared every day, every minute of every day, never take a play off, being on 24/7. That was the hardest thing. But gets easier, right? Every time you have a challenge, it's just like eating a 20-ounce steak. You bite through it, then you digest it, then you look back and you think, I can do that again. That wasn't as hard as I felt it was at the time I was going through it. Okay. All right, we'll go there. That was for you. You go ahead.
As like an entrepreneur, like what mindset do you have?
Yeah, so I think it's the burning desire to not be a corporate drone, right? Like I've always been very, very independent, right? Independent minded, and I get this from my mom, who Rob's had to deal with at times, and
But she was great.
yeah, and I never wanted to, like, you don't realize this at 14, 15, 16 years old, but when you're an adult, most adults have to do what other adults tell them all day, right? And having been, playing shoulder to shoulder with very alpha male athletes, you don't want other adults to tell you what to do. You don't want other adults to tell you, you need to do this, that, and the other thing to get a raise, and oh, by the way, the raise is capped at 10%. Like, that's not how I play life. And so from my early days at Google, I always thought, like, I need to figure out how to escape working a corporate job. And so one of the things that I realized when I was in college, seeing people speak in my college classes, was, oh, if you're in shape and you speak well, you can basically do anything in life. That's one thing that I learned from Coach Corbin, from Coach Bakich, is they were tremendous recruiters, tremendous speakers, and they were in shape. That was the one thing that surprised me when I took my official visit, is all the coaches were working out at the same time as the players were, or at least they were working out, running multiple miles in the morning, lifting weights. They were all in really good shape. And you realize on the back end, it's like, oh, that's a universal passport. Looking good in a shirt, speaking well, you can talk your way into almost any job you want if you want it. But if you're fiercely independent, I basically spent 20 hours a week every week for 10 years thinking about, like, how can I not do what I'm being paid to do by my company? And what that meant was I'd go to the gym in the morning, because I figured out, like, hey, if everybody knows that I'm lifting weights at 7:30 in the morning, even if I come to work 45 minutes after everybody else, nobody's gonna question me, because I'm in better shape than everybody, and I speak well, and I have answers to all the questions that they're bringing me. So I figured out how to cut all these corners that other people who I work with couldn't figure out. And then what that allowed me to do is essentially work 20 to 30 hours a week for a lot of my time in corporate America, while still getting paid like a six-figure salary as if I were working 40 to 60 hours a week, and then using that time on the side to explore side projects that may ultimately pay out. And what I'm doing right now is probably my third or fourth attempt at building something that had enough demand to where I could make money and live off of that.
All right, Jake.
So going back to how you said it was kind of hard and stressful balancing the school and the baseball aspect, how did you kind of like get into like a routine to make it like kind of easier and not as like stressful?
So routines are important, but at the same time, you got to realize that your mind learns how to navigate things naturally, right? So just like, think about your first day of high school versus your 50th day of high school. Which day was more stressful? What did you do differently your first day than your 50th day? Did you do anything to become more comfortable? So it's good to be prepared, right? It's good to have plans. It's good to have structure. At the same time, it's also good to trust your mind. Your mind will be able to simplify complexity as long as you give it enough repetitions. Sort of like, if you spend enough time in the batting cage, you're going to be a better hitter. You don't need to complicate it and overanalyze it. You're going to be better from it. You go to school every day. It's going to become easier just because you start to recognize the patterns. You start to figure out, like, all right, I really need to work hard at that, but I don't need to work hard at that. And ultimately in life, the most successful people, they're very good at working hard at the things that they need to work hard at, but they also don't work hard at the things that less successful people work hard at, because they figured out that they can overcome that by having a superpower in like one or two other areas. And so you'll see that time and time again. Anytime you see like super successful people, they're not better than you at everything that you're good at, but they're very good at a couple things that basically excuse them from not being good at the things that you guys are good at.
Kind of like a superstar in baseball. You know, he might hit 50 home runs, but hit 220.
Yeah. And guess what? He's gonna have a contract next year.
That's right, a big contract. Hey, what's your GPA?
Good.
Amazing. You'll go to very like a Vandy or Stanford, that type of thing.
The most important lessons you'll learn are going to be on the baseball field, though. They're not going to be in class. People ask me, like, you know, what was the best class you took? And I would say baseball practice, because baseball practice taught me human psychology. It taught me group psychology, right? No classroom setting teaches you how to work in an ultra competitive group surrounded by 25 alpha males and three or four really aggressive people like yelling at you. And so, yeah, like, class is good. I graduated with honors from Vanderbilt, but the other people who graduated from honors didn't learn a quarter as much as I learned because of the opportunity I had in practice. Watching good coaches, because you can't be the Vanderbilt coach, you can't be the Stanford coach unless you're good at life, you're good at recruiting, you're good at talking to people. And so I always paid attention, like, how is Coach Corbin able to convince these people to give him this? That seems crazy. And I started noticing when I was like 18, 19, 20 years old that all these successful people who came to our practices, who hung out with us, they were always good at negotiating for more than what everybody else got. They're always good at getting exceptions for themselves. And so I started paying attention. Why? Why is Coach Corbin able to get exceptions for himself in ways that I would never expect? Oh, because of his tone, because he understands how to take care of people, because he's smart enough to say the right thing to the right person, and he looks good, right? That's the key, because if you go through life without cheat codes, life's hard. Life's really, really hard if you go through life without cheat codes. So when you the better you get at baseball, the more successful people you hang around, the more you notice that almost all these successful people are employing cheat codes that they learned from other people earlier in their lives to cut a corner that 9 out of 10 people can't cut, so that they have more energy to focus on things that truly matter so they can continue winning. And that doesn't mean that they're lazier. They're not lazier. They're just smarter at allocating their effort on the few things that matter and not the 20 things that don't.
Going off of like the high school education and college education, is there a big difference between the two, like class-wise and study-wise?
Yes.
Test-wise?
Yes. It probably depends on the college you go to, but you know, like I mentioned a few minutes ago, I studied for my so my first 2 tests in college were an astronomy class and a political science test. And the astronomy test, all my teammates who were in the same class were like, oh, that's the hardest test I've ever taken in college. I got a B on it, and I thought I was gonna get an A. I'm like, oh, this is fine. Like, I just studied for this the same way I studied for high school tests. Well, my next test was a political science test. I studied like 2-3 hours like I would in a high school test, and I got a 48, which is lower than any grade I ever got in high school. And so my first semester at Vanderbilt was really when I had to study the hardest, because I was new. I didn't recognize the patterns. I didn't know what I could do, what I could afford to not do. And so, yeah, I mean, I was probably spending, I was taking 15 hours, but I was probably spending maybe 20 hours outside of that studying, in addition to a lot of hours on the baseball field. So yeah, it's harder. And ultimately, the people who I played with who were able to balance everything appropriately were really good at recognizing patterns. And I've come to that many times, because the dumb majors, the athlete majors, they're actually harder for people who can recognize patterns, because they just force you to memorize a lot of stuff. Because if you're not good at pattern recognition, people, just go like rocks for jocks, or at Vanderbilt it was called human and organizational development. That stuff's hard because there's no patterns to get from it. You just have to like memorize all these terms. But I found that if I took classes that had pattern-based knowledge, economics, for example, it's much easier for me to study for an economics class, which is considered hard by most people, than it would be to study for a geology class, which is considered easy by most people, because one requires pattern recognition and the other requires rote memorization. Well, I can recognize a pattern in 20 to 30 minutes, but if it takes 3 hours to memorize something, it's going to still take me 3 hours to memorize it. So that's kind of how I figured out how to spend less time and still get good grades.
Marco.
How do you start like a business? How do you start like a business, or what you like to do like from scratch? Like where?
Yeah, so I mean, there's the operational aspect of it, which is not that important, right? So you go online, you set up an LLC or an S corp. You can do that through LegalZoom, pay them a few $100, and you get a bank account for that. That's what people will tell you in business school, but that's actually not that important. What's important is you have an idea that you think differentiates you from everybody else, right? That's the most important thing as an entrepreneur, is not just to provide value, but to provide unique value, right? I sell a recipe book online that's a 30-page PDF from recipes that I just made for myself with my ex-girlfriend. I sell it for $59. You go to like a bookstore, you get an actual recipe book with an actual chef, it's like $20. You get a physical copy. I deliver a PDF to someone's inbox, $59 or $44 on sale, right? The reason I thought that was a good idea was because I looked at the market and I thought, everybody's talking about calorie counting and everybody thinks they need to eat salads and like feel like crap all the time to lose fat. I don't do any of that, and I'm in way better shape than I was 10 years ago, and I'm not counting calories, and so let me commercialize this. And so the advantage that I have relative to my market is, yeah, other people can get you in shape, but nobody is telling you, yeah, you don't need to count calories. You can eat delicious food every meal of every day. And so being unique allows, so the one thing that I learned in baseball is that you always want leverage, right? Rob's probably told you, like, there's team rules, but then, not all team rules necessarily apply to every player all the time if you just observe how coaches coach their teams. When Sebastian Janikowski was playing at Florida State and he missed curfew before a bowl game, Bobby Bowden was like, well, I have rules for my American players and I have rules for my Polish players. And and guess what? If Sebastian Janikowski wasn't a first rounder, he was going to get kicked off the team. Well, what kept him on the team and getting drafted in the first round? The fact that he could kick field goals. And so unique differentiated value that nobody else can bring to the table will always give you leverage. So that's the number one thing you want to focus on. Value that nobody else can replicate.
I have like a part two of that question.
Yeah.
Like how do you kind of get it all started and find out like your idea or whatever? Like how do you like push it out like to the public?
So I started, me personally, I started through social media, through Twitter, and I thought, like, if you go to a web coach, you're like, okay, get to this many followers, then you start an email list, so you start emailing people. And so in my mind, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna get to like 1,000 followers, and I'm gonna do this, and once you get 1,000 people on my email list, then I can release a product. But the reality is social media gives you really good feedback for what people want and what they don't want. And so by the time I had like 6,000 followers on Twitter, I was getting Major League Baseball players who I'd never actually played with or knew, like messaging me out of the blue saying, hey, where can I learn more about what you're doing, right? So your audience they're gonna validate your ideas simply by you kind of posting on TikTok, posting on Instagram, posting on Twitter. You're gonna get a sense of, okay, these people like what I'm putting down. And when they're proactively asking you for more, where can I get this? Where can I get this? Where can I get this? That's a signal like, yeah, I can probably release a product for them and I have a good idea what they're gonna like.
Marcus?
How does your routine look different from
Well, there's no class in the minors. So in college, half of our games come on a school day. So school days, we're going to class from say 9 to 12 or something like that. Then we're gonna, if it's a road game, we're gonna hop on the bus. If it's a home game, if it's a 7 o'clock game, if it's a 6 o'clock game, we're probably gonna get there at 2:30, I would say, which compared to the minor leagues, from a time standpoint, is probably fairly similar. College practices are a little bit more structured. So everybody, we're doing square drill, we're doing all these drills, everything's like spelled out. We're doing this for 20 minutes, we're doing this for 20 minutes, we're doing this for 10 minutes, we're doing this for 10 minutes. In pro ball, it's a little bit looser, where in rookie ball and short season, you're expected to show up for early work, but it's not as organized. There's more people dicking around. most of the coaches let that fly. You know, but between either college or pro ball, you're going to those games 3.5, 4 hours before the game. You're not like practicing for 3 hours in a row before a game, but you are getting a couple hours of practice in. Then you're chilling for about 45 minutes, getting food, coffee, whatever, and then the lights come on. Then you play for 3 hours, and then you go home and you do it again.
What time, say you've got a 7 o'clock game, you're done at 10, what time are you going to bed?
10 o'clock game. If you're done at 10, you're showering, so you're probably out of the stadium by 10:30, 10:45. You got to eat. If you're in college, they're gonna give you meals if it's a Friday night. If you're in pro ball, yeah, they're gonna have a post-game spread. So maybe you end up leaving the locker room after eating a little bit at like 11, so you go home at 11:30. Of course, you got a lot of adrenaline in you, so you're not necessarily going to go to sleep right away. In the minors, a lot of guys will go drink afterwards. I don't know if they still do as much as when I was playing, but that was a thing when I played. College, not so much. So you're probably going to bed. Like with college, you're playing an earlier game the next day. You're probably going to bed at like 12:31, waking up at 7:38, and then you're doing it again. In pro ball, you can wake up a little bit later. Sometimes they'll bang. Coach Corbin didn't really like banging BP on the field. Like, is an opportunity to practice, so we were always going to practice before the game. Whereas in pro ball, sometimes they'll waive like a formal in and out if you finish late, so you can sleep a little bit later. But yeah, you're gonna play on low sleep sometimes, if not more than sometimes, and it doesn't matter. You still got to get it done.
So these guys are all freshmen, these sophomores. They're talented.
Yeah.
What are they? If you were doing what they're doing again, what would you do differently? What would you do the same for the next couple of years to be successful, ready to go? Whether they leave their senior year going in the draft, because we've got about 3 guys, 2 or 3 high school kids, and within 2 or 3 other guys that'll be drafted Sunday night. Or they're just going to go to a big time school.
I would have. So I was big into the weight room, and I had to be when I was younger and smaller. I came to Rob weighing 150 pounds. My second year, I was 160 pounds. And everybody's saying you're undersized, you got to get bigger if you want to play at the next level. So I was spending a lot of time in the weight room to where my senior year, I'm probably bench pressing close to 300 pounds, squatting close to 400 pounds. And I take my visit to Vanderbilt and everybody's bigger than me. And I think, well, I need to be big. I need to be big to play at the next level. If I had to do it again, I probably would not have cared what I bench pressed. I probably would have focused more on hip mobility, shoulder mobility. I don't think that bench pressing more than 275 pounds helps you as a baseball player. I think it probably hurts you because you end up getting tighter shoulders, so you can't get as much extension through your swing. And most pitchers aren't bench pressing over 275, so I'll assume that won't happen. But shoulder mobility is one of the most important things for a baseball player. So I would have focused more on developing shoulder mobility and developing hip mobility. I probably would have done very similar running. One of the other things that maybe by the time I was 17, 18, I would have done it. Like when you're training your body to get to the next level, your first 2 or 3 years of that require a lot of work, just because your body, neurologically, you're not able to use your body as well as you will be in a couple years. So it's almost like running and lifting weights are a form of practice. You just need to do it a lot. As you start to become more advanced in your athleticism and you start to get closer to your peak, I would have worked out less, because I've found that once you're fairly close to your genetic peak, you only get better by training harder than you have ever trained before. And you can't do that if you're doing it day after day after day. You need to be able to take rest periods, so then you can train at an increasingly higher level. So I would have done less so that the activity I did do could have been done at a higher level of intensity, and I would have done more mobility work.
This was great.
Yeah.
We could go on and on. I got about 30 tired guys. It's been a long day. Alex, this was great. Alex is going to be with us down at Lake Charles, and you're going to be coaching. We've got a couple teams. We go back
Yeah.
and forth with things. You'll be in the dugout. You'll kind of be a guy where you just pull a guy aside and say, hey, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? And kind of a troubleshooter, so
Yeah.
to speak. And so we're really looking forward to this. And it means a lot to me when a guy comes back and says, I'd love to help out and I'd love to contribute. By coming today, this was amazing. This was one of the greatest talks. Well, it's the most unique talk for sure I've ever
I
heard.
can promise that.
Yeah, you guys will never get, you just got a master's course tonight. It was unbelievable. So we really appreciate it. This
Yeah,
was great.
thanks for having me, man.
Thank you. And there's some guys here that I think will follow in your footsteps on and off the field. There's some really sharp young guys.
Nice.
Great. Thank
Come
you.
chat me up.